Today's agenda is looking at the coronavirus legal updates for community service organisations. And I'd like to welcome you all to today's live webinar session that we are running. This session is going to be run across two dates, today and next week as well. We are anticipating that there will be further legislative changes that will occur during this time, and we will update the resources that we are making available to yourselves and all other registered attendees. The purpose of today's session is to really clarify some of the changes that are occurring, what your agency as a not-for-profit community service organisation needs to know about. Our law firm has been running these sessions right throughout the entire pandemic. We started these sessions back in February, almost 2 years ago, and have been running these sessions almost weekly. So the resources that you do have access to already, you can actually view these directly on our Gemba 360 YouTube channel, and can also access this directly from our website. And essentially what you do have open resources to view is information directly on our website at kaizensynergy.com, or also access these COVID legal webinar series also directly on our YouTube channel, which is generally open across the board as well too. You will also be getting access to the resources through the Gemba 360 dashboard, which allows you to access all of the materials that we are talking about today, including the slides and also the recorded webinar series as well too. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's move on and have a look at what today's agenda is going to cover. We are going to look at the COVID rules, a legal overview, and next steps for community service organisations. There is a move from Commonwealth governments, and this is irrespective of changes in governments that we've recently seen, and also state governments, to actually move some of the monitoring management from pandemic legislation into kind of under the umbrella of work health and safety legislation. And I'll actually show you what I mean by that, but there is this shift that we are seeing right across the board in terms of ongoing management of the coronavirus. So essentially what today's agenda is going to look at, we're going to answer some questions that people have come back to us on since we opened up this invitation about a week ago. We're going to look at COVID and managing COVID, turning it from the endemic versus pandemic, what the current laws are, also how to manage clients, your workplaces, and also the legal resources. So it is a bit of a moving diagram that we've put together to give you an idea of where we're going to head. Next week, we are going to show you how to implement some of these changes that we're talking about as well too into your agency, so that way you meet your legal compliance obligations for your agency as well too. Now, with it, there are a number of recommendations we are going to make straight up. We do suggest you access your Gemba 360 dashboard and review the policies and toolkits. You will see that I will refer to a number of policy templates which you do have access to, and you can simply access these by going into the Gemba Docs area, and it will open up and you can actually have a look at key policy templates that we are going to utilize and show for your agency as well too. This does include the changes to mandatory vaccination policies, work health and safety policies, a whole range of policy templates is there specifically focused on COVID legal compliance obligations. There is also the employer toolkit, which I'll talk to you about. This is pulled from a combination of work health and safety and fair work as well, and obviously reviewing these slides. And if you do have any questions, coming back to our law firm on, but we will return to this slide for you as well. Now, how we have designed these sessions, just as a brief overview, we have looked at the legislation, we've looked at policy context, we've looked at checklists, we've looked at government, Commonwealth government directives, and also state government pandemic legislation. This has allowed us to create the cascade of documents that then drive your compliance obligations, self-assessment, and identify areas for improvement that your agency can use. So essentially, from this session, you're getting a series of checklists. These are available directly online as well too via your Gemba dashboard, and you can see these running along the left-hand side of the toolbar that I am moving up and down. The reason that we've put these online, obviously, is that as laws change, we will be changing and updating these, which we have done throughout the pandemic, really to keep your agency updated so that you do have access to real-time legal updates for your agency to utilize. As I've mentioned, the work health and safety areas that we're going to look at is around some of the toolkits that are available. You do have access to these. We have opened this up as part of our license arrangement specifically for the COVID safety space as well too, and dashboard. And you will find that on our website, just to go through this, even from our pricing chart as well too, it does give you a single user license to be able to access the Gemba dashboard. We have done this all the way throughout the pandemic, specifically for agencies, and at least it gets you started in order to access some of the key resources that your agency needs from a compliance support. That said, let's have a look at the coronavirus and Australian workplace laws. Now, some of the questions that people have asked us is, do we need to keep staff vaccination information? Is this a breach of the Privacy Act? Now, there are some questions that agencies have asked, that commonly and frequently asked questions that we're going to cover off just before we jump in, because this is really important for your agencies to be aware of. So generally, firstly, we say in terms of the Privacy Act, there is an obligation across all states and territories for agencies to be aware of what their vaccination staff information is for staff. In terms of the Privacy Act, there is the need, and we have suggested to agencies to amend your privacy policy to look at vaccination information where it is relevant for your agency to deliver services. So this may well be in areas like health, community services, disability, NDIS, aged care services, where there is a mandatory obligation for certain staff to actually have their vaccinations. And some of the rules that you'll see in different states and territories do say that if a staff member doesn't give that information, then you are to treat them as unvaccinated. And this is some of the rules that you are seeing in the different states. Now, in terms of breaching of the Privacy Act, it's really around what use you're using for this information. So under work health and safety rules, generally the rule is that you've got to provide a safe work environment to staff, and this staff also includes volunteers. So if you are holding on to this information, it's not a free-for-all for all staff to access, but it might be a privacy officer, it might be your COVID safe officer, it might be CEO or the likes that have access to this personnel information. So often it is managed via HR. And as part of that, if this is the reason that you're using it, and also to ensure that you're setting up systems, work health and safety systems, to ensure you're doing all that you can to keep your staff and volunteers safe, then this allows you to collect the information and also have it at ready access. I will add to this that you can, as part of this, also generally get access to other information for staff. And I will just add, as part of this, let me just jump in to our site here, that you do have access to your template policies that you can access. And let me just bring this up and show you these templates. So if I log in to the Gemba dashboard, and this is specifically for the vaccination policies, you can go directly to the Policy and Procedures Register. you can click on the COVID safe policies, and you'll see a few of these policies listed here. I am going to go into the COVID policies section, and you do have a range of policy templates that your agency is free to use. One of these samples is the sample COVID safe vaccination policy. And if I click on this, it opens it up as a Word document, and you can then use this document to freely change it around if you like, but it does give you a template policy to utilize. You can see we've set the review date for the 1st of July. And what it gives you is templates on vaccination requirements, vaccination programs, proof of vaccination information, and you can simply go through and search and replace, if you like, your agency name with the information that we have here. And this just opens up into a Word document for you to be able to use. And this can be viewed quite simply in the Gemba Docs area. If I click on here, and you have a series of all of these policies to be able to use at your agency's convenience. And it is there for your agency to view. So if we do have this, look, it is something that your agency can immediately access. Now, the other question that people did raise was, we have recently heard about fake vaccination certificates being provided by new staff to employers. Is there a way to verify the legitimacy of a COVID-19 certificate? Generally, these certificates should have the green tick, and we are aware that there is some agencies that have reported that COVID-19 certificates, they are in some ways producing them as fake. We would suggest that you have a policy document and inform staff that essentially, if these are found to be that if they are found to be fake, that there are fines that staff can be actually fined for. And this includes staff, volunteers, and also clients as well too, for providing false and misleading information. So with the fake vaccination certificates, we do suggest that you have a position on that. Now, another agency has just contacted us and also said, we are a men's shed that has over 100 members, and we operate on a couple of different sites, each owned by the local Shire Council. 2 of our members are unvaccinated, and up to recent changes in Victoria rules, we have denied them access to both sites. Can we continue to deny them entry? Our average age is 76 years old, and most of our members would object to the attendance of the 2 unvaccinated members. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory here. Look, if other members do object to it, then essentially it may well be that you continue to restrict them. It also means here that we've got a situation where it is average age of 76, and it is a group of vulnerable members of the community as well too. So again, from work health and safety legislation, you are required in this case to ensure that you provide a safe environment for clients that are attending your service, and also any staff that you have. So in that case, we do suggest that the members who are unvaccinated be notified of this, and also the position is for your agency of the reasoning why you may not choose to have them attend this particular site or service. Now, essentially, I will add that there are fines of up to $10,000 may be issued by the court system if people do provide false and misleading information, and this could include false information, including vaccination certificates as well. You will find that there are fines that have continued, even though the media has not covered these, and they are defined by different levels in terms of low-level breach, medium-level breach, and high-level breach. Now, these may change for things like failure to use a QR code system that is now currently out of date. And you can see that even some of the state government information that they have put on their own websites is essentially out of date. But there are still fines that may be implied by or either to individuals and sole traders, or even companies and body corporates. And you can see some of the scaling fines on the right-hand side that are still in force as we talk about. Now, in terms of enforcement, it has moved generally from departments of health to places like the police force. And we've just used an example in Victoria as an example, but the same thing does apply in Queensland and New South Wales as well too, in South Australia, where police are being used as enforcement of COVID safety. WorkSafe, we know, is also undertaking relevant audits in different states as well. And there are other authorised officers that may be issued by the state health departments that may do patrols and also review pandemic orders and enforcement compliance activities. Now, one of this means that what does this mean for your agency? Well, essentially what we are seeing now is a movement from pandemic legislation more and more into fines-based and enforcement-based approach, whether it be under use of police, WorkSafe, or, as we've seen, authorized officers. Now, for agencies, if I go back before going into what does this mean for you, well, if I go back to our original agenda, essentially what we're now seeing is right here at the start where we're seeing what does long COVID mean and what are the current laws for your agency. We need to really just carefully have a step through of this, because essentially what we are seeing now that we go through is what is long COVID and how is it actually affecting your agency? What does this actually mean before we get through to the legislation? Well, essentially long COVID is being seen around the world. And what I mean by that is that there are long-term COVID-19 related sicknesses. We're also seeing agencies where staff are now starting to freely travel interstate. There may well be exposed as a close contact, and people are well aware of what some of the definitions are. But some people are now experiencing health difficulties for many months after they have been infected with COVID-19. And for agencies, it means now that you are actually having to consider what is and how to manage deficiencies in your workforce. And we're seeing this being publicized in the hospitals and community health services. But essentially what we are seeing is that estimates suggest that around 93% of absences related to COVID-19 sickness does last for less than 30 days, and over 99% last for about less than 3 months. However, we are seeing that in some cases that this may actually be extended. Now, how do you actually manage long-term COVID for these cases? What we are seeing is symptoms already being taken by agencies where people and workers are saying that common symptoms after 12 weeks include fatigue, breathing problems, muscle, headaches, changes to heartbeats, nausea, persistent fever, pain, rashes, etc., and also sleep problems. And essentially, agencies are now referring these to GPs to essentially get staff checked if they need to, and also second opinions. What this means for your agency, though, is how do you manage work health and safety obligations for your staff while this is going on? And so you've got essentially two channels that you need to monitor within your agency. And so when we look at the legal snapshot, it is around looking at how do you actually manage these requirements based on your legal compliance obligations. And so what we are seeing is changes in a range of different settings. For example, in Queensland, the vaccination checking will require in vulnerable settings like hospitals, disability services, and aged care areas. But what we are also seeing is that the penalties for this may also still continue for up to 6 months, and with 100 penalty units or 6 months imprisonment, and also on the spot in fines can also be can appear. In New South Wales, for example, we're seeing that, and I'm just extending this out, in libraries, museums, and galleries, these are now open where anyone can visit information and education facilities. Face masks are no longer required. However, visitors and staff are also not required to be fully vaccinated or carry vaccination evidence. However, saying that, what we are seeing is that in certain areas like work environments, employers have the discretion to allow staff to work from home, but there are also checks and balances that agencies are required to have to ensure a safe work environment. While this is causing kind of confusion within agencies are saying, what should we actually do and how should we actually monitor this? Now, what we are actually seeing for agencies, if I go back, is to actually screen staff. And again, one of the key things that we're seeing is using the COVID daily assessment form. And we've actually seen agencies continue to use these as almost a self-health check for staff to continue to use, because what this is showing is essentially the date and the time that people have done their checks, and also it records some of the questions that you might need staff to actually complete. What this does is essentially say, have they got any of these symptoms? It does change as the relevant state government, health or territory government in your area changes. This form also gets updated. But what it does do is allow you very quickly to monitor all of your staff very easily, and those at risk at the very least, in terms of what their requirements are. Now, extending this out, there are some requirements in New South Wales that we are seeing where rules that apply to music festivals with over 1,000 people are required to have specific compliance obligations. And again, we'll send these slides out for yourselves to actually look at. And there are certain rules for organisers too. Now, in Victoria, we can see that the state government have actually changed a number of pandemic orders, and these are just summarised here, and also introduced some further pandemic orders as well too. Now, what this means is that the public safety orders for different exemptions into different agencies are also required to be monitored by your agency. And this includes things like essential visitors to care facilities. It includes restrictions to visitors of residents for end of life, or even other residents and other healthcare facilities as well too. So you can see that even some of the directives on different areas covering everyone from worker-specific definitions of employers and workers, accommodation workers, airport workers, have also been updated. And we'll actually circulate these orders for you today. In addition, there is also changes in WA in terms of what some of the directives are. And masks are required for people aged 12 years and older in following settings. But this does include hospitals and healthcare settings, aged care, public and passenger services, and also correction services. And proof of vaccination is also required. It also means that there are some restrictions in specific risk areas and agencies that need to carefully consider what their COVID obligations are. And of course, there are restrictions to travel in WA to remote Aboriginal communities, specifically as these are a vulnerable population groups. Now, what we are seeing across the board is for agencies asking the questions, how do we actually manage and what do we need to be aware of? Now, one of the things you need to be aware of is around risk assessments. And we can actually see in a number of pandemic orders in all states and territories, they're starting to talk about these risk assessments. And the idea is that managing work health and safety risks is an ongoing process that needs attention over time. This is actually confirmed by actually information based on the Work Health and Safety Australia website. And the government regulator is actually directing agencies that saying all currently operating businesses must assess the risks associated with exposure to COVID-19 and implement control measures to manage those risks. This then means that moving from your COVID safe plans to a risk compliance-based risk approach. And we've actually seen what we're going to show you work very, very well for other agencies. Now, from a case study perspective, one of the questions that agencies ask us is, how do we manage our risks within our agencies? And what you will find on your dashboard is this. We have set up a risk, what we're calling a risk register on your dashboard. Now, when you log in, what you'll find, and this is something that we will go over next week, we have put up a series of risks that your agency can look at. And here it is here. There are about 9 risks. And what we've seen is how to protect employees and customers from COVID-19, going to work with the coronavirus, health and safety of the workplace and business interruption. And the reason that we have chosen these particular areas is for a very simple reason. We have picked these up because this is some of the key areas that work health and safety have focused on when looking at specific information and audits within your agency and policy context. So it actually aligns with what work health and safety are looking at from their own policy documents. Let me just repeat that again. Work health and safety policy documents from COVID-19, we have put into your risk register, and what it allows you to do, and I can see a couple of questions coming up here, of what do we do once we open this up. Now, let me just walk you through this because this is important. Essentially, once you log in to your Gemba dashboard, and someone's just said, where do we get it? Once you log in, you can go into the risk register. You click on this and you will see these ones here. If I was to look at what it is, you can simply click on the edit button and you can work down the questions of how you've actually got and what you need to do. Now, the good thing is that this form is based on a ISO quality and audit standard, which allows you to monitor all of this information that you can see here as well too. And again, this is open for just your agency to access. And it allows you to essentially manage your information and also complete your compliance-based audits within your service. So it is something that we are going to go through next week. Now, the other part that you need to be looking at as part of your client, as part of the client space, and again, we will be building on this next week, is what are the clients that are visiting your agency. While there are, whether you work in an art gallery, whether you're a migrant resource center or a community health service, this will differ based on what services you're delivering. Now, it may well be that the mandatory requirements for you to monitor this have been lifted by your relevant government department or government health agency. One of the things that we have said, though, is to look at, well, what are the types of services that you're delivering? If it is mandatory, if it is around group sessions, is there a work health and safety obligation for you to manage whether people are going out to visit clients, whether they're coming to see you, whether it's a group session that you are running, whether you're contracting with other agencies as well. And we'll talk about this next week as well, some of the operational services that you're delivering. So what you are needing to see on this is some of the obligations that your agency needs to be aware of when delivering services to clients. In terms of your workspace, again, what we've seen is the continuation of things like general cleaning and encouraging people to manage safe working distances. For most places, the maximum distance and minimum distance of workforce capacity has been removed. But again, what does it mean from a work health and safety point of view? So essentially, what we've done here is summarize this down for you. When you are looking at things like capacity limits, here is some of the information that you need to consider. also down to record keeping as well too. So recording which staff have come into the office each day, who are the visitors that are coming in, have you sufficiently screened them? Should people be wearing face masks if they are unfeeling well? Is there signage and regular cleaning that's also occurring from purely just a work health and safety perspective? And we're going to drill down right into some of those policy documents that I spoke about last week. Over the last few years. What we have seen, and I will add to this, is that you do have access to start having a look at the policy documents that I spoke about in your Gemba docs. And all of these are template documents that you can access. And I know that our support desk will actually reach out to each one of you to make sure that you can actually log in today and have access to these documents, which you can start looking at. And these are all updated for you and are currently meeting all of your legal compliance obligations. The other part that I will look at briefly for you as well too is there is two specific compliance obligations that are coming out directly from Fair Work and also work health and safety obligations. Now, Fair Work, returning to the workplace, has a tool and a policy documents which actually look at how do you actually manage staff coming in. What is the checklist that you actually need to use in order to meet your compliance obligations? So there are two different policies that Fair Work and also Work Health and Safety have done, and this includes the risk assessment. Now, this includes meeting your Fair Work obligations for staff and volunteers, and also your Work Health and Safety obligations for staff and volunteers as well too. And all employers' community service requirements are required to take care of health and safety of all workers and visitors to your workplace. So this is critical. What it means, though, is that from a public health response, you do need to manage COVID-19 vaccinations. You do need to look at physical and social distancing, cleaning and hygiene, and risk assessments are a part of this. Now, there is a lot of competing information that you might have. So what we have done is actually look at merging these two policy documents together. We have pulled this directly off the Fair Work and Safe Work sites and looked at merging these together. And essentially what you've then got is these forms made available under your toolbar in Gemba, which you can use. And this allows you very easily and simply to meet both your Fair Work obligations and your Work Health and Safety obligations as well. It is this form that we're going to go through next week specifically for you to encourage your staff and volunteers to complete this with you. And this will allow you to meet your Fair Work and Work Health and Safety obligations as well. So essentially what we are seeing from the latest legal compliance changes, and this is from the pandemic orders, is that there is a shift directly from pandemic legislation for community service organizations to meet your legal compliance obligations to now it being managed really under Work Health and Safety, and also ensuring that you meet those obligations. So there is a shift going on from, it is still under pandemic legislation in terms of your compliance obligations and fines and enforcement, but essentially now there is now this shift that is happening for your agency to meet its Work Health and Safety compliance obligations as well. As we work through this next week, we will be opening up the forms and actually going through, and someone has just asked, will we be going through exactly the form? Yes, we will be going through the form part by part to show you what is some of the information you should be submitting into it. How do you manage and what policies do you then link to it as well too? We do encourage you to jump in and start having a look at your legal dashboard and the resources attached to it. Of course, as I mentioned at the start of the recommendations, is to look at the legal resources. We will be circulating the slides out this afternoon. And if you do have any questions, by all means, please contact us directly. You can contact me on my mobile, which is listed here, 0413 699 515, or you can email our support desk as well. If you do have any questions, we will stay online and answer these. If you are watching this recording after today's live session, then by all means, please reach out to us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com.